collaboration with the Cyprus Mail. This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Charalambous.
Coming up on the programme this week, the Interior Minister is determined to restructure the way the Cyprus Broadcasting Corporation operates.
When you expect from a national broadcasting corporation to fulfill its mandate and its role, it has also to have the right structures. It does not have the right structures.
At a conference this week on the circular economy, the Transport Minister outlined her ministry's plans for sustainable mobility.
One of our efforts now is to put in every place a bus stop, a modern bus stop. We have somebody who's designing it, and we will support all the authorities and all the local authorities in order to place these bus stops everywhere, and then we will put the telematic information in it.
We meet an Australian who uses comedy to tackle serious subjects like racism.
But I also knew if I was going to be performing this in country towns that it had to be entertaining first. You can't just say, come and see a play about racism, you'll love it. We had to create a Trojan horse, if you like, a story about things that they identify with, football, club culture.
And a Dutch professor talks about sustainable energy systems.
I don't think it's responsibility for individuals or separate groups to find the best solution. I think it's a societal problem.
On last week's programme, we mentioned the fact that the House of Representatives had turned down the proposed budget for the Cyprus Broadcasting Corporation. Well, last week I was at a working breakfast with Interior Minister Konstantinos Petridis when all of this was hitting the headlines. He was pretty clear that things needed to change at the state broadcaster, and I asked him what he had in mind.
Well, first, the bill has to be voted. So hopefully today it will be voted. Otherwise, we will have a huge problem about the CyBC being able to operate. It will be illegal. Nevertheless, I did talk with the Board of Management and with the trade unions. It is about time to see the structure, the new structure of the CyBC. I have asked that until the 24th of the coming month of April, I need their final proposition after consultation with the trade unions in order to have a modern professional structure taking into consideration the PwC study of 2004 and also find ways to decrease the gap between different employment statuses of different parts of the employees. That's one very important issue because, for example, maybe 75% of the employees of the CyBC are employed with a status that does not allow them to have, after 20 or 25 years of fruitful employment, to have a promotion or supervision or to acquire tasks or mandate that their experience and their abilities could dictate for the interests of the CyBC. Of course, there are many legal issues that we have to address. There is also a legal issue, an important legal issue in regards to that. But all these have to be solved. Because when you expect from a national broadcasting corporation to fulfill its mandate and its role, it has also to have the right structures. It does not have the right structures.
But you just said that the PwC study
there is
was
a study
done
there.
in 2004. It's 2019. What
yes, that's why
I've
asked until April to give me their last proposition, because I know that they had some differences. Time has passed, but there is a solid base there. Use it. There have been discussions, but you have to proceed. There will be some politically difficult decisions to take. Once we start this discussion, we have to make it.
And do you think that it will get through Parliament? Because one of the provisions you've suggested is that this blanket coverage of political party statements should at least stop or be changed.
This is something that will be done in parallel with a separate bill. I think that we are a little bit hypocritical. We say that we want a real national broadcasting operation, but by law we tell them to transmit and retransmit, public party announcements with no news in them, over and over again. And right now there are 8 parties. Tomorrow there could be 12 political parties, and that's why there is also a huge disproportion between the public broadcaster television and the private broadcaster television regarding how much time they dedicate to political parties.
And how much time...
Without having the aspect of news.
Regional news as well.
And regional news as well, yeah.
Interior Minister Konstantinos Petridis talking to me at a working breakfast last week in Nicosia.
Keep up to date with events in Cyprus and around the world with the Cyprus News Digest.
Earlier this week, the conference centre in Nicosia was abuzz with people attending Circle 2019. That's a conference subtitled Challenges for the Islands in the Era of the Circular Economy. And it was dealing with sustainable mobility and intelligent transport. So, of course, some of our ministers were there, among them the Minister of Agriculture, Rural Development and the Environment, Kostas Kadis. He couldn't stay for the whole conference, but I did catch up with him as he was hurrying to his car for his next appointment. And I asked him what conferences like this one could do for Cyprus in terms of improving our record on sustainability.
This conference brings together distinguished scientists, policymakers, people that are involved in circular economy. So they will exchange views, they will present latest knowledge on practices that are used internationally and they could be effective. So we are waiting from the results of the outcomes of this conference in order to see how we can utilize it, the knowledge produced in the case of Cyprus.
The Minister of Agriculture, Rural Development and the Environment, Kostas Kadis.
You can subscribe to the Cyprus News Digest on iTunes for free and get the program downloaded to your phone or tablet so you can listen anytime, anywhere.
The other minister who addressed that conference was Vasiliki Anastasiadou, the Minister of Transport, Communications and Works. Transport, of course, very much one of the topics under the microscope. And when I spoke to her, I asked her how her ministry would benefit from conferences like this.
It is a very good opportunity to bring experts from all over Europe to exchange views and give us their know-how and experience on how we should handle these matters and educate our own people. We have very good experts as well in the ministry, but it's very, very useful to have open mind and have the views of others that have been there and tested it.
So yes. It's really finding out what best practice and how it works, but the islands particularly are different from connected countries, aren't they? So how much more difficult does that make it to implement things like public transport and indeed transport on and off the island?
Yes, this is how we should make best use of the ideas that will be expressed today, because they are giving you the right way to use your own sources in a renewable basis, so as your minus to become plus, using water, using energy, reusing waste, reusing energy. This is the whole idea. You don't have the economies of scale to support you, but you have your own sources to make them a power for you.
Now, the Environment Minister said this week that we need to do a lot about transport, and that if we're to meet the EU targets, then we have to cut emissions, we have to, I think, implement one of three strategies. He had short-term, medium-term and long-term. It's a big ask in an island where almost everybody drives a car, and almost every family has maybe 2 or 3 cars. So the pillar of this one, surely, is public transport. How are we going to get that off the map?
Our main target now is to put in place a very successful public transport system with new buses, very, very convenient rides, accessible buses, bus stops, and also to introduce the telematic system, the information that every citizen should take in order to know where to find the bus and when.
OK, but your predecessor was talking for a long time about smart buses. You go to any city in Europe and at the bus stop it'll tell you how many minutes till the next bus is coming.
Now we have this telematic system in our buses and you can find them in an application in your phone. And you can use it.
But shouldn't it be on the bus stops because a lot of old people
Of course
don't
it
use
should
phones
have
and
been,
apps?
but you know very well that we don't have bus stops everywhere. And one of our efforts now is to put in every place a bus stop, a modern bus stop. We have somebody who's designing it, and we will support all the authorities and all the local authorities in order to place these bus stops everywhere, and then we will put the telematic information in it. This will be a big change, and with this way we will bring people in public transport. We try to take them out of the private cars and bring them in public transport. And this is a challenge for the ministry and for me, and I hope that we'll make it. By 2020 we have the new agreements with bus companies, and I hope by that time we'll have all this in place.
Now, the Mayor of Nicosia mentioned bus lanes, because one of the biggest problems for the buses here to run on time is the fact that the left-hand lane of two-lane roads tends to be used by drivers as a free parking, and they stick their hazard lights on to say, I'm only going to be a minute, but they're blocking the lane. So it's not going to work unless we can tackle that as well, is it?
Yes, it's in our plans, ministry's plans for sustainable mobility, to put lanes in every major roads, so that we have bus lanes for buses, and also arrange all roads so that we have for pedestrians lines or cyclists. This is how you manage the traffic system. A holistic approach, yes, and we're working on that, and you've already seen it in some like Aglanja road, and we're working on that. And also the one-way roads that we're going to have in Kallipoleos and Makariou Avenue soon. These are within this approach.
Our Minister of Transport, Communications and Works, Vasiliki Anastasiadou.
This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Charalambous.
The last film in the Commonwealth Film Festival 2019 came all the way from Australia, and along with the film came the guy whose idea it was for the merger and who also stars in the film. He is comedian and actor and many other things, Damien Callanan. Damien, what gave you the idea for the merger? I guess maybe first you could tell us a little bit about what it's about, but without giving it away to people who didn't actually see the film last night, because it's doing the rounds.
It is doing the rounds. The brief précis of the merger is it's the story of a small, struggling rural community in Australia that is suffering, as many towns do, from economic downturn, but most egregiously their football team, the Australian Rules football team, which is the kind of heart and soul of the town, is looking like they might have to fold or merge with another team. And so Troy Carrington, who's the character that I played, Troy, used to live in a town, but went on to a moderately successful but tragically concluded football career. He has come back to the community, and he's a slightly reviled figure. He's an environmentalist, and he led a protest that meant their timber mill shut down, which is part of their economic problem. He gets asked to coach, and then it ensues he comes back with sort of left-leaning ideas and comes up with the idea of recruiting refugees to make the team survive. So I put all those things in a pot and stir it.
And it works very effectively, if I may say so, but I think it was also sponsored or taken up by the people dealing with racism in Australia, because you use comedy, and it's very funny in places, to tackle what is a very serious subject locally. Yeah.
Originally, because it's based on a play that I wrote, which I played all 9 characters, one-man play. And that was originally a commission from some regional arts and health bodies in Australia to address racism. But I wasn't really given much of a brief, to be honest. It was go away and write it. But Regional Arts Victoria, who were the main body behind it, they were aware of my work, and that had already created I guess the template for it in this fictional town had been part of another show I did called Sportsman's Night. So that was really the only brief. It was then just up to me to decide how to tackle it. But I also knew if I was going to be performing this in country towns, that it had to be entertaining first. You can't just say, come and see a play about racism, you'll love it. We had to create a Trojan horse, if you like, a story about things that they identify with, football, club culture.
And the small town mentality of a community that is facing hard times, and that's happening all over the world, not just in Australia.
That's right, yeah. So that's how it was created, and it worked. It worked, I could tell from audience responses after the show that even if they didn't see the message about, racial harmony and so on, they at least identified with the town, and particularly in some of those towns, I've never seen anything like that. I was performing it in little mining communities, and so we tried to then copy that template in the film, but of course that's easier said than done.
Was it the first film that you've done?
First film I've written, yeah. I've been an actor in several films, but...
And what's the difference when you approach it from a writing point of view? Because you do stand-up comedy, and that's one genre, if you like.
Well,
but putting it into a film script must have many other challenges.
Well, I do stand-up comedy, but the merger play was not stand-up comedy. It's a play, but because of my skills as both an actor and a stand-up, I do a lot of interaction in the shows. So I use the tropes of a stand-up comedian in that I get information from the audience and I squirrel that, if you like, and then bring it out when I need it, which of course you can't do in a film. So you're not left with those techniques which I've built up over 2 decades now as a performer.
Well, for a start, you don't have the feedback, do you?
No, that's right, yeah. So, but I knew that the basic story worked without that. It's just the garnish and advantage of performing in a one-man show where I don't even have other actors that I have to pretend to get the lines right for. I can just diverge and improvise where needed. Look, the biggest difference for the film for me was in a one-man show, particularly a one-man show, as opposed to even other forms of theatre, whoever's on stage is the protagonist at any given time. So you might look at it and think, it's their story, but it's really all their stories. But in film, structure dictates that you follow the story of the main protagonist. But
you've also got to have interaction between those protagonists, haven't you?
Yeah. Interesting though, people used to come up to me after the one-man show and say, I love the relationship between that character, and they're never on stage together. It's just the world that you create and the changing of the dynamics. Like Bull and Saeed in the play do the same thing. They come from poles apart to close together, but you never actually see them physically interact. So yeah, obviously you have that advantage. The hardest thing for me was Troy Carrington, the character I play. I've been doing him for so long in many different formats. I perform him as an after-dinner speaker at big events. And I had to make him real. In a play, particularly a one-man play where you've got so many characters to differentiate, the characters by their nature are much more arch and exaggerated. So I had to kind of bring him back. And as you said, he's never interacted with people before. So that was fascinating for me as a performer, but also as a writer, just trying to still keep him interesting, but make him feel more real so that people could connect with it. Even though there's fanciful things in there, but it's grounded enough that you believe that this could be happening.
And in between the sad moments and the serious moments, there is, as I say, comedy. But let me ask you about the refugees and asylum seekers who played in your film, because they came across brilliantly, and they're not actors, most of them, are they? No,
we had probably the most significant role that was played by a refugee was a character called Didier, who's a Burundian refugee. Francis, the actor who plays him, is a refugee from Sierra Leone. He arrived in Australia as an 8-year-old and is studying acting at the university where we filmed The Merger at Wagga Wagga. So he was like in his second year acting course. All of a sudden, this film landed in his town, and he was great. Like he's very talented. He's already got a modelling career, ticking along very nicely.
And what about the other refugees? So
the other refugee characters are all played by actors, but Faisal, who plays the main refugee character, Saeed, he's Syrian. His mother's Syrian, his father's Lebanese, so has a strong connection to the story. And then we had a lot of refugees playing the featured extras. So in the football team, we had about 8 or 9 of the characters were fully formed, and then there were these peripheral characters who were kind of always there, giving the colour. You know, there was an Indigenous player. And
what about the Yazidi?
So we had 2 Yazidi guys playing in the team. One of whom, he became like the mascot to the film. This guy, he was so enthusiastic. He'd been in Australia less than a year. He was walking kilometres just to get to set. We ended up organising a showrunner to go and pick him up, to bring him. He would come to every social event, always resplendent. And slowly we kind of got to know him and realised his story. And Faisal, who plays Saeed, speaks fluent Arabic. He's got human rights lawyer friends, and he started working with his family to try and get his brother, who's still in Germany. I think he's still in Germany, sadly. So there was a lot of cross-pollination going on, and the acceptance. We had our world premiere at the Melbourne Film Festival at the Gala, which was huge, but the real premiere was in Wagga, and it was just so beautiful to see a Burundian drumming troupe in the foyer, the guys who taught Francis how to do the Yekishikamba dance in the film, and family members of even the featured extras who were, just felt like they looked like Hollywood.
What reaction have you had from the audiences where you've been there to see it? Because again, in the audience you will have people who already think like your character, and then you will have those who are very much like Bull, who we should say is very anti-refugee, jobs for us, not for them, go home and all the rest of it. Yeah. And that tackles a big problem pretty head on.
Look, it's hard to say, because there's always going to be people in the audience who are silent and don't come and talk to you and say what they think. But in the same way that the live show worked, people are just driven to the story through laughter, and it's the power of comedy. It has an incredible way of getting people into stories that wouldn't normally open that door. Comedy and sport really does that. So the character Bull that you speak of has the biggest arc in the film. He's the naysayer, but we also set him up as being believable. Like there's reasons for his racism and his ignorance. I mean, sometimes ignorance is willful, but in his case, it's just he's just had a bad trot, and he just can't keep pace with the change. So John Howard, who plays that character and plays him beautifully, researched the character really well. He, of all people, had a lot of audience members come and speak to him afterwards. But blokes like him, like his character, they'd sidle up to him and say, that was interesting. Yeah, it's made me think. Yeah, one bloke said to him, "That's right, really made me think more about non-Australians."
So, are you pleased with that? I mean, was that the whole idea behind it, apart from bringing entertainment, which is, of course, your job, and fun, which is your other part of your job, but to tackle such a serious subject and possibly have the power to make people open their minds? They may not change their opinions, but at least to consider the other point of view. Is that important?
Of course, and to do it in a way that's gentle enough. And too gentle for some people, but hitting people over the head's not going to change anything. It's almost trickery, really. It's just, here's an entertaining story, and I hadn't thought about that.
And so what next?
What next? I've got a range of projects all lined up. I'm currently writing a play about a very similar theme, really, but not the refugee side of it, but about a small country hall. The country hall is very much the fulcrum of regional Australian society. So it's a commission, and it's a cast of 5, which I'll be in as well and direct. So that's my most creative. I've got a kids book I've just been commissioned to write, and when I go home, this is kind of the opposite end of my world. I do a comedy show called The Wine Bluffs with another stand-up comedian, and this is a little bit more stand-up, but we play faux wine consultants, and we just basically crush wine snobs.
Okay, that's very much the comedy side. Final question for you. Should we use comedy more to tackle very serious societal problems?
Absolutely. And I'm conscious with my comedy, often it's hard to go back when you've done something that's got a little bit more meat on the bone.
What about political correctness? Because that's a death knell for many comedians, isn't it?
Well, political correctness is just common sense and common decency for me. I had two people come up to me, and this is the great thing about the film. I had one person come in this year, straight after the film, and said, "I bloody love that. You know, political correctness has gone too far," which suggests that it's not politically correct. And then someone came to the other side and said, "Thank you so much for delivering such a powerful film with a message." So within the film, there's characters like Bull who are saying things that are offensive, but it's character driven. It's not jokes for the sake of it. And when I do the live show and I play Bull, he's a lot more confronting. Like he says things that makes kind of particularly left wing urbane audiences sphincters tighten collectively. But it needs that shock to then see what happens when he has an arc. And there are some nights in the country, like where I hear the audience are just laughing too hard at him, and then sometimes in the city they're not laughing hard enough. They're taking it too seriously. So I guess that doesn't quite answer the question about whether it's impacted, but it just makes you more thoughtful as a writer and a performer about what you're saying, whether you can back it up. And in character-driven stuff, of course, the characters have to say politically incorrect things. Otherwise, there's no story. There's no conflict. But yeah, look, I have other works that touch on more serious issues, war and so on. But for the time being, I'm doing a couple of flippant things. And I'll get back on my high horse soon.
Well, we certainly hope so. That's Damien Callanan, who was in Cyprus recently for the screening of his film The Merger. Look it up. It's a great story, a good laugh, but with a very serious message. My next guest was in Cyprus recently for an event organised by the Ambassador of the Netherlands in Nicosia. She is the chair of Design of Sustainable Energy Systems at Eindhoven University of Technology and from the University of Twente. Her name is Angel Reinders, and she joins us now. So, Angel, tell us first about the importance in these times of climate change of designing sustainable energy systems.
So the thing is that 75% of our greenhouse gas emissions are the result of energy production or energy consumption. So it really makes sense to replace a large part of our energy systems by renewable energy systems. But since we don't have that much experience yet with these new innovations in the field of energy, we have to think about how we can design them best.
But we already do have some technology in place that is giving us the option to cut down on fossil fuel use. So how much use are we making of renewable energy sources now? We do have some of the technology, although I'm sure it'll get better in the future, but we need to up the amount that we're using it now, don't we?
Yeah, so we use already renewable energy like wind energy, solar energy and biomass, but in most European countries these numbers are not exceeding the 10%, and that must be increased, of course. And on the other hand, this opens also a lot of opportunities for innovations in the field of energy technologies and energy efficiency. Like we see now all these developments with electrical vehicles that will save a lot on fossil fuels. But also in the field of renewables and energy efficiency in the built environment. Think about building integrated photovoltaics, better use of solar thermal technologies. So I truly believe this is going to change in the next 5 years.
In academia, is there some sort of time frame and quantity? I mean, can you say that by 2050 we can use maybe 50% rather than 10%. We need to quantify, don't we, how fast we can advance?
Usually that's done by politicians, and in academics we can provide possible solutions, but we can't, for instance, change the implementation speed. That's actually a matter for all stakeholders involved.
Now, when you look to the future, where do you think the big chances are for sustainable energy use?
I think the big chances are in the field of solar energy applications. I mean, solar energy is abundantly available everywhere and in most locations over the whole year through. So I think it can be better exploited. But not only that, you have to combine it with other technologies to create a good integrated energy system. So I would say for the future we have to think about combining solar energy with wind energy and biomass applications and sustainable means of energy storage. And then we can probably reach the goals of the politicians.
So for the future, what is your message to make this something that is out there for everybody?
I don't think it's responsibility for individuals or separate groups to find the best solution. I think it's a societal problem that has to be solved by all stakeholders involved. So I believe that we can come to the best solutions for the use of renewable energy by having discussions with all the stakeholders. It means with government, with citizens, with industry, with utilities, and from there you can develop plans.
And those plans doubtless will be developed in the coming years. We've been talking to Professor Dr. Angel Reinders, who is the Chair of Design of Sustainable Energy Systems at Eindhoven University of Technology and also the University of Twente. Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.